What's up, guys? Thank you so much for journeying with me on this podcast adventure. The last episode, we talked about burnout. We talked about the fact that it's not discussed enough, and whenever it is discussed, it's discussed in a very negative light. But I'm glad that we did that because we also acknowledged the things that need to be acknowledged, not only about the system, but also about nurses. And so in this episode, we're going to talk to my guy, Aaron, and he's going to teach us how to regulate our emotions, healthcare professionals, how to tap into ourselves, how to beat the system, how to not allow the system to weigh on our shoulders, and how to prevent us from walking around with the weight of the patients, the weight of bitter coworkers, our own weight, what it looks like, how to avoid getting to that point. I think it'll be great. I think there is a lot of dope information that's exchanged here, a lot of enlightening information. So here we go. Okay. Hey, how's it going?
How's it going, Ashley? Thanks for having me.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being part of this podcast. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Aaron Washburn. For the past 3 years, I really delved into the mind and the body. And as I continued over the last 3 years, my main focus has been emotional regulation. And the reason for that is if everything starts and ends with a feeling, why not start there? So I've been working with nurses for the past 3 years on helping them regulate their emotions so that way they can manage and reduce and manage burnout.
That is lovely. So I'm sure you already know this is NurseCast, and the main reason why I wanted you to come on here is precisely for what you were just explaining about helping people, especially nurses, manage their emotions, and also nurses specifically manage burnout. So a lot of my questions are very tailored to nurses, but of course, please feel free to dive into all of the techniques and the exercises that you have for just, the general audience. My first question is, can you tell us when a nurse comes to you, or whenever a nurse confides in you, or whenever you find yourself offering these exercises and these teachings to nurses, what is it that they commonly complain about, or what is it that brings them to you that they deem their breaking point?
It's a very solid question because I know a lot of nurses that are listening to this. When nurses do come to me, their biggest breaking point is when they start to feel burnt out, which is kind of scary because if you're waiting until that point, then it's going to take some time to recondition your mind to allow yourself to start feeling that peace again. So mainly when nurses come to me, they're always asking, okay, how can I reduce this anxiety so I feel less burnt out? So that's uh, the main thing nurses come to me for is just reducing burnout and reducing stress and anxiety.
So, would you say that the anxiety is associated with the burnout? And I guess I asked that question because I don't know that a lot of nurses know what else is associated with burnout. It's just called burnout. I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be here. I'm sick of this. I'm having a hard time being passionate. Would you say that burnout is associated with specific emotions?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the biggest emotions is anxiety that they feel most of the time. And it's very unconscious as well. Sometimes they like to play it down, meaning that they're not stressed or they're not overworked. And when it becomes unconscious, that's when it becomes a bigger problem. Because oftentimes, even with some of the nurses in the past week that I worked with, the solution to their problem is to be able to identify what they're actually feeling because we suppress our emotions for so long as humans because we're conditioned that way. And since we suppress it for so long, especially with nurses, they lose connection with themselves and they forget why they became a nurse in the first place. So then they want to switch fields. Some of them stay, some of them go. But as soon as they're able to start identifying what they're actually feeling, then that's been the hugest game changer for them. So anxiety is one of the biggest ones that is associated to burnout. And then stress, and it could be conscious or unconscious. Once it goes from unconscious to conscious, then you'll finally be able to figure out what's going on. Because if you don't know, then you can't really help yourself.
Absolutely. So then, for starters, what I would like to say is I love the fact that you mentioned that a lot of nurses, what they'll end up doing is they'll just switch fields. They'll just give up on the profession entirely. They'll just deem themselves burnt out, tired of the profession, and then they'll just move on. They'll go back to school. And that's fine. I welcome that. There's nothing wrong with change, but inevitably that just leads to burnout in another field. And I feel like you mentioning that there are ways to manage this, there are ways to prevent this, and there are methods that you can utilize to prevent yourself from feeling like you've made the biggest mistake by choosing nursing as a career. And I think that a lot of nurses who started their career being passionate about this, they find themselves at a crossroads where they're like, is it really nursing that I'm sick of, or is it just that I don't necessarily know how to manage what I'm feeling? Or another thing, that I spoke about in my last episode is the system, the fact that the system is broken. And I don't want to sound too discouraging by saying we can't fix the system, but if we're going to start somewhere, we might as well start with managing our emotions to preventing us from getting to a point where we hate a career that we started so passionately. So all of that being said, can you share with us, like, do you tell nurses that they need to practice specific exercises, or is it a process? Like, is it, step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of thing?
Yeah, there's 3 levels to emotional regulation. Well, actually, that's level 2 right there. So with doing this whole process, level 1 is awareness.
Absolutely. That makes perfect
And
sense.
yeah, it's awareness. That's when you're able to identify what's actually going on in your body.
Right.
So I'm just going to give this brief introduction of the step-by-step process to everything that we get in life, meaning from your thought all the way down to the results that you get. Because once you understand that concept alone, you're able to understand, okay, why is it that I'm experiencing burnout? There's
Right.
a quote, I forget who says it. He says, you get what you think about most of the time. So if you're thinking about how stressed you are,
That's what you're
you're
going to
going
get.
to get that. Yeah, that's what you're going to get.
Absolutely.
So everything starts out with a thought. You have a thought first. That thought process creates an image in your head. That image in your head will inspire, or we'll just say inspire right now, or influence an emotion in your body. Emotion regulation, emotion by itself is energy in motion. So when you have that thought, you have that image, then you have energy in motion, which sparks up a feeling. That feeling puts you into action, and then the action will get you the results in your life. Now, if you're having negative habitual thoughts all the time, you're going to have negative habitual emotions like depression or burnout or anxiety. For those that are watching this, imagine or remember a time when you felt that most of the time. What did you end up doing? It's hard to exercise. It's hard to eat right. The thing that you normally would do is, since you feel anxiety, some people like to cope by eating more or eating bad. So those emotions that you're feeling, those feelings that you're feeling, it leads to the results that you're getting more burnt out. You're gonna feel burnt out, especially the food that you're eating in your body.
Yeah.
So um, so I'm trying to remember the question that you asked. So if you can ask that again, then perfect.
No, yeah, no, absolutely. You definitely started answering it. So I was basically just trying to see if we can get an understanding of whether or not what you're telling nurses or just the general public, are we just practicing exercises, or is it a process? Like, you have
Mm.
a system in which you'll say, okay, you need to practice this, but step 1, step 2, step 3, or here are a list of exercises that I want you to practice on a consistent basis, or, what exactly, I guess, briefly, does it mean for nurses to begin to manage their burnout?
hmm So yeah, I was answering it.
Yeah.
So level one, awareness, and having that thought all the way to the results concept in that awareness part is key to know. Number two is emotional regulation, because when you have that awareness, you start to create that awareness in your body, and you come back online. As my body language coach would say, you come back online because you're allowing yourself to feel again. If For those that are taking medications for anxiety, is you're once you start having awareness in your body, you can start having a lot of emotions coming up. So then that puts you into level two, which is emotional regulation. There's a step-by-step process that I have for everybody, specifically for nurses before, after, or during the shift, they can do to be able to go through level two. And level three is self-mastery. So eventually, the longer you start regulating your emotions, the more trust you build with yourself, the more connected you build with your, or the more connected you are with yourself. And then as a byproduct, you're more connected with the people you work with, and especially the patients. And the reason why I'm adding patients in there is because there's a reason why everyone became a nurse.
Absolutely.
I believe that most nurses they have a specific healing process that they do that they might not even be aware of.
Right.
So when you start to build a deeper connection with yourself with that simple three, or the three levels, then you get to hold space for your patients.
Absolutely.
Holding space for your patients just means that you love every part of yourself because you went through level two and level three. And because of that, these patients can start to be heard, they can start to be seen, they start to be loved just by the vibration that you're holding, just because you've been doing it for yourself first. And that changes the healthcare paradigm because those patients will stop coming back. They no longer have to rely on the healthcare system, where you empower them to start feeling their emotions, regulating them just as the way you did as well. So it's three levels.
That is awesome. That's pretty freaking amazing. So basically, nurses cannot be anything for anyone if they cannot be there for themselves. And the best way to do that is to become self aware, to figure out where the problem is, figure out where the burnout took place. Why am I burnt out? Where have I began to neglect myself? Where did I start to disregard my needs? And so you reconnect with yourself. And once you reconnect with yourself, you're able to connect with the patients. Did I make
That's very powerful.
is that what you
Very
just said?
powerful.
Okay.
Yes. So even just this one question can determine, are these nurses taking care of themselves? It's like when the plane goes down, you have to put the oxygen tank on you first before you can help someone else.
Absolutely.
So how long has it been, whoever's listening, how long has it been since you've done the things that you love to do? Because if you've been holding back on doing those things, you can't really show up for other people if you can't show up for yourself.
Absolutely. So then my next concern is when it comes to dealing with the system, because again, I remembered mentioning that earlier, dealing with the fact that the system is broken, dealing with the fact that it's pretty much set up to, I don't want to say keep us down, but for lack of a better word, prevent us from putting ourselves first. Is there a technique? Is there an exercise? Is there something that you recommend for nurses to begin doing at that point where they begin to realize, okay, maybe it's not me. Maybe it is the system. Maybe it's not that I hate nursing. Maybe it's just that I hate the hospital that I work for, or I hate every single hospital system out there. And that ends up turning back into a different form of burnout. Like, how do I deal with this? How do I combat this?
How many programs out there in any hospital that covers emotional regulation? There's
How
probably
many?
not much.
No,
Yeah, I mean, there's not much,
no, I
and
don't
that's
really feel like
sad.
there are any.
Yes, and that's sad because if you start there, the healthcare paradigm changes. Just three concepts that I want to give you to everybody is concept number one. Well, before I go on concept number one, to make y'all understand it and comprehend it more, I want you to think about a memory from the past. So
Okay.
if you're white or if you're listening to this, even you think of a memory of the past. Think of a memory and notice that you'll start to feel feelings come up.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now think of the future. Think of it. Imagine an outcome in the future. Imagine your next shift. Anything in the future, you're gonna feel feelings come up in your body. So when you have that confirmed, you can nod your head yes. Whoever's watching this is that your mind cannot tell the difference between something you imagine versus something that already happened. Your body's going to experience it in real time,
Oh, yep.
always. So any image that you hold in your head, your body's experiencing it. So, and the reason why I like to give you that concept is because if there's not a lot of hospitals that teach emotional regulation, the biggest reason I believe or know that nurses have high burnout is because when they go back home or they share their day with any of their friends or family, guess what's happening? You're retelling the story of the day, which is good, but you have to understand how to regulate it too. Because the more you retell your story about all the stress that happened in your day, you have that image, that story in your head, and your body's experiencing it in real time. So when are you actually clocking out at work?
Mm.
You're not. So when you're going home and you're talking about your day, you're still at the hospital because your mind is there. That's why most nurses feel burnt out because they're not aware of how the mind and body works. The more you talk about your shift, a stressful shift, the more you're going to experience those chemicals, those feelings in your body that recondition your body to feel that same stress. So you're always stressed. So if you learn how to regulate it, then you'll be better off. You'll start to feel more peace and at peace. I need to start writing your questions down because I totally forgot what that question is. I
No,
apologize.
but you answered it, because what I asked was, how do we, in a certain example would be, a nurse recognizes that even though he or she is burnt out, it's not because they're beginning to dislike the profession. They're acknowledging that the issue is the system. And you brought up the
Mm-hmm.
fact that the system isn't going to support you. The system does not have a healthcare, professional regulation program. They don't have these things set up for us. And so because of that, we have to stop being so hell-bent on fixing the system and be more focused on ourselves, so that when we do leave the hospital stressed out about a stressful day, we don't carry the stress with us, feeding the burnout.
Mm-hmm.
So what I
So
get from
now
that is that, oh, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, so now that even you just saying that it's not the system, nurses are the system. You can be the system now because once you start learning how to regulate your emotions, a butterfly effect starts happening. Because what I was talking about earlier is if your mind can't imagine the difference, or if your mind can't tell the difference between the future and a past memory, then any triggers that you have that's coming up is attached to a memory from the past.
Right.
So if your mind can't tell the difference, if you have a trigger coming up where a patient yelled at you that resembles, your subconscious is going to bring some memory up that resembles the same thing that happened in your past where your dad yelled at you the same way the patient did. That's why you have this triggered feeling coming up. So when you're doing talk therapy and you're explaining that story over and over again, um, you're reconditioning that body with the same pain. If you're not regulating that emotion, then you're not going to have a better response to that patient. So what I mean by that is there's three concepts. This is concept number two, is that you get to be the parent to that child that child needed during that time. And that child that I'm talking about is you whenever you start to feel stress or a reaction or any triggers that come up. And when you get to attend to that 8-year-old self of yourself in a stressful situation, or when you feel panic or distress, you get to have a conversation with yourself. And when you do have a conversation with yourself, that's one way of regulating it. You are bringing awareness to your 8-year self. And since you're bringing awareness to your 8-year old self, I see you, I hear you, and I love you. And when you do that, 8-year old self is no longer going to have that same reaction to when that patient yell at you. Now you're able to respond, responsibility. Now you're able to respond to that patient and get to choose new feelings for that patient. You have a connection with your 8-year-old self now. You're coming from a place of love. That patient is yelling at you, and you no longer feel angry or reactive back. You get to hold space for that anger that patient is holding. Love versus anger. Which one's going to live? Love or win? Love is unbeatable. It still exists. So powerful. So now that you're holding space for that angry patient is going to start becoming vulnerable with you. And now that you're holding space and now he's becoming vulnerable, since you regulated your emotions, there's a lot of nurses that are empaths too. This is why it's really hard to identify your feelings, because sometimes you might be feeling the way the shift feels like, the way the hospital feels like, your coworkers, everybody's stressed. You're processing their emotions too. But when you're helping that patient go from anger to love, that patient feels heard, seen, and loved. He's not going to come back. So knowing that, you get to become the new system because you're holding space. It's a butterfly effect. So if a patient is angry at you and you touch that patient with love, he's not going to be angry at another nurse. He's not going to be angry at his parents when he gets home or wherever he's going. He's going to be touched with love, and he's going to start feeling that humility back in this world. And then he's not going to be coming back to the hospital as much until, he finds some other professional help. So we are the system now. We get to be the system.
What you're saying, I feel like I am able to relate to it and it resonates with me. And I think that it's likely because, and I also feel like a lot of other nurses, a lot of other healthcare professionals, whether they're social workers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, doctors, whatever the case may be, we all have to deal with patients, and we all have to deal with angry patients. We all have to deal with vulnerable patients. We all have to deal with the sadness, the grief of loss. And even if it's not the loss of a loved one, it's the loss of the life that patient once had that they're no longer going to be able to continue having because of a disease process, an autoimmune issue. All of that being said, in certain circumstances where we are dealing with a patient who is overwhelmed and who's really anxious, we tend to absorb that. And I remember talking to one of my coworkers, and I just expressed to her that I just had a great patient who did not budge at all or shove or put on a performance when it was time for me to start her IV. And the patient had asked, do you deal with those kinds of situations a lot? And I said, I do. And I feel like several years ago when I started nursing, that anxiety would transfer to me. And I feel like I felt that anxiety and I'd get nervous and I would just automatically miss the IV. I'd feel like shit. I'd feel like I don't even know why I became a nurse. I can't even do something as simple as starting an IV. And I feel like I've progressed so much just by learning how to not allow myself to absorb the emotions of the patient, but to acknowledge them and maintain what I'm feeling, which is confidence, which is, self-reassurance. Like, I know what I'm doing. I am here for a reason, and I'm going to make sure that I do my best. And I don't feel like it's always easy to do that, especially when healthcare professionals are so bogged down by the weight of the day and everybody else's weight. But all of that being said, I do want to stress to people that are tuning in and listening, healthcare professionals, this isn't an overnight process. This isn't something that you could snap your fingers and expect, okay, I did the exercises. I did what Aaron recommended. I'm back to work the next day. I still hate these people. I still hate this place. I still want to kick the bucket. I still want to explore another career. Give yourself time. Give yourself grace. Be patient with yourself and respect the process. I just feel like even me, myself, it took me some time to understand that becoming comfortable in my own skin as a nurse, it takes time.
There's this another quote. I'm a quote guy, so everyone's gonna love this one. It was said by Adriana. I forgot her last name, but it doesn't take time, it takes courage. The moment you're able to step in to those negative feelings, it is the moment you get to change in the moment, and change happens in the moment. So how many times are you gonna step into your own courage? Because now you're just going against time right there.
Right.
The more you step into your emotions, those negative ones, and you regulate them, the faster you, or actually I want to say the faster, because I don't want you to focus on how fast I go over that process, but the more efficient it is for you, the more effective it is for you. Because it takes time. I've had the nurse work with me for a whole year. She's mastered it. And even just talking about absorbing everybody's feelings in the hospital setting. There's a difference between absorbing and there's a difference between holding space.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're walking inside the hospital, and let's say that this is what's going to happen when you start to regulate your emotions, the more space you can hold. And you can think of it as bandwidth, as like a big bubble of love. When you walk in, maybe since you haven't been doing too much work on yourself, this is how small your bubble is. And now you're in everybody else's bubble. Everybody else's bubble in there is maybe stress, anxiety, anger. And now you're absorbing all that. But as soon as you start regulating your emotions, then you're going to have a bigger and bigger bubble where you're protecting that part of you that doesn't need to absorb it, but you can regulate their energy. You get to hold space for all those people that you surround yourself with. Your environment starts to change because your reactions are different. You no longer are reacting to it. Even unconsciously, you might not even realize that you have been reactive.
No, that makes perfect sense. So, and I know that this might have been something that we've already went over in multiple different ways, but for some of us who are just tuning in or just joining the podcast, can we go over like specific ways or ways to tell the difference between absorbing the emotions and holding space for the emotions? Like, I understand the grand scheme of the topic, like the difference. There is a distinct difference between absorbing someone's emotion and holding space for the emotion. What do you recommend healthcare professionals do to make sure that they understand the difference between the two, to be able to actually hold space versus absorbing it, going home with it, and regurgitating it to their loved ones?
You'll know the difference when you're absorbing it, you're going to feel a lot more drained.
Mm-hmm.
When you're holding space, you're going to feel more energized. So when you're holding space, what you're actually doing is regulating your own emotions in your own body during that time. It could be during your shift, after, or before. But when you're not regulating your emotions, I give you guys quick and effective ways to do it on the spot. Like when you're extremely like stressed as well, I'll give you guys some quick methods or techniques to deal with it. But that's the key difference right there. When you're going home, when you feel drained, then you can probably ask yourself, all right, was I holding space or was I absorbing? When you feel drained, you're absorbing. When you're holding space, you're not as drained, and you'll realize the more when you start doing this even more, you're gonna have more energy. You're an empath. Everybody transmutes energy. Chase Hughes, if anyone looks up Chase Hughes, he says that we're not talking to the physical body, we're talking to the chemicals and the energy in that body. Emotions are energy in motion. So if any patient is feeling a lot of anger, you're going to feel that same anger in your body. Now, I'm also a body language translator. I can translate body language. There's static body language and there's dynamic body language. Static body language, when you're feeling some stress, you're going to feel that above your belly button. Stress or fear. You're going to also feel that in your chest. Anytime you feel your chest locking up, or any tightness above your belly button, now you don't even have to know what you're feeling because your body is telling you. Your body is like a dashboard in a car. It lets you know what's going on in the engine. So when you're feeling those emotions, especially like in the hospital, and you feel like as soon as you walk in, your chest is tightening up. Take a deep breath in, release, and say out loud, I give myself permission to feel my fear, and it's okay. Even when you start doing that, that's a more advanced technique. Your body might not be aligned with you, where you feel resistance, where you don't want to feel that fear, because you lost trust with your inner child, or you lost trust with your emotions, because you've been suppressing. The longer you suppress your emotions, the less trust you have with yourself. So that's where it takes courage, and then time will follow. So I give myself permission, or you can have an inner conversation with yourself. Close your eyes, or just imagine closing your eyes. You are allowed to feel fear in my body. Just giving yourself that alone is awareness. Awareness alone is love. And love will touch that fear.
Right.
And to even give you this quote as well to help, just awareness alone will really help with this quote alone. I'm not here to teach you. I am here to love you, and love will teach you. So you don't even need to know what's next in that moment because love is teaching every single cell of your body. So when you start, I give myself permission to feel my feelings and it's okay. Or you are allowed to feel my feelings in my body. And the reason why I say you is because we've been called you our entire lives up until now. So it's like you're talking to that inner child. You'll feel less resistance there. And when you start to do that, you're regulating those emotions. And then you start to feel like you're creating space for other people because now you're not triggered and absorbing those emotions. And it's going to be easier for you all to understand this when I take you through the process.
No, that was perfect. Well said. Can I just ask, give me 1 second. I think something happened with my camera.
Oh, yeah, no worries. It's all right.
There's a message on my camera.
I see that too. Movie recording.
It says, oh, well, it said movie recording has stopped or something like that. Here. I'll just keep going. It's gone now. Okay. How long is each room? Oh, well then. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. I absolutely love the way you explained all of that. I feel like what we can do, since we are unfortunately running out of time, is we can talk about ways for healthcare professionals to reach out to you, to reach out to everything that you offer, your resources, because I want this to be an ongoing thing. I want the purpose of this episode to specifically be for healthcare professionals to understand that there are other ways to deal with their burnout besides quitting, besides completely giving up on the career, besides, going home and crying, besides crying on their way to work, feeling like this is it. And in my previous episode, I remembered posting a clip. I'm in a Facebook group for travel nurses, and I posted a clip that this other nurse had posted where she was basically crying about not necessarily having money and feeling like she has to put up with the nonsense that is nursing. And I feel like for nurses or any healthcare professional that feels trapped, it would be beautiful if they knew that there was a way to deal with their emotions, regulate their emotions while they process their way physically into another career, into another area of nursing, into another area of medicine, into another area of healthcare, period. You don't have to carry the weight or the burnout with you from one area of healthcare to another. There are options. And I just feel like it's so important for people to understand that. So can you pretty please tell us where the people can find you, where they can find your resources, your social media, all of your platforms?
Yeah, so right now is in perfect timing because I actually just finished a live training for nurses on Saturday of last weekend. And
Awesome.
it's a course now. So with this course, I'm gonna give you a discount code. And for those that are listening to this, 50% off. And in this course, unfortunately, I wasn't able to help demonstrate it right now because we are running out of time. But I'll help, or in that course, I am showing you how to regulate it, giving you the steps and the resources that you need in there. So that's where you can find it. I'll send that link if you want. I can send it in the comments or in the messenger in here. And then also, if you follow my Facebook, I can also send that link as well. It's Aaron Abelgas, Abelgas, and you'll be able to find me there. I post a lot of content on my Facebook page. And then I also have a Facebook group for nurses, always talking about emotions. And it doesn't stop there. Talking about physical health as well, nutritional health,
Oh, lovely.
environmental health. I
That's
have a group of
perfect.
superheroes in there that will guide you along every single journey in your life because we got to work on our body as a unit. And when
Absolutely.
you do that, you become even more powerful, more connected with yourself. And I can provide all those links for you.
Yes, I would absolutely love that. I'm just going to post all of those links in the caption section of this podcast. And I just want to express my appreciation for you coming on here, sharing all of this with us, talking to us about all of this, just expressing the need for people to know that there are options. And I don't know if I can stress this enough, because once nurses or any healthcare professional, once they get to that point, it almost kind of feels like the point of no return. Like there's no coming back from this. It's like, the hole is in the boat and you've done absolutely nothing to patch it up, and now you are completely underwater and it feels completely impossible to resurface, to just get your head above water. And I just want this to feel like a breath of fresh air. I want it to feel like, okay, there is hope. I don't have to completely quit.
And there is, and I'm so happy to be on here right now, because once you start doing this work, you cannot go back. You will understand the type of light that is in this work to be able to shift the healthcare paradigm. And I just want to add one more thing.
Absolutely.
Is that the reason why I wouldn't say called to do this, I really have this passion to do this, is because as I was a kid growing up, my mom worked 3 jobs as a nurse, and it was hard for her to take care of her health. In 2012, when I was 17 years old, it caught up to her. She was very stressed. She was very burnt out, and she was diagnosed with lung cancer. So at 17 years old, my parents walked me up into their room, and I could just feel the heaviness in there. And they said, "Your mom has lung cancer." And I know it strongly correlates to her stress, because I've seen some profound work done the past few years that things can be reversed. So when I was told that, and on her last day, she was on her bed that she sleeps on, that was her deathbed, and she took her last breath in front of us. I seen her take her last breath. And ever since then, from 2012 to 2020, I was living in depression for a long time. I was able to finally get myself out of that. How? By regulating my emotions, by understanding how the body and mind works. So once you get into this work and start regulating your emotions, you'll start to have a huge impact in not only your life, your body is going to thank you, first of all, tremendously. Your family is going to thank you. Your patients are going to thank you. And you're going to thank yourself as well. The whole healthcare, the paradigm is going to shift. I see it happening just by doing this work alone. Because if everything starts and ends with a feeling, then start there. So seeing my mom pass, it really took a toll on my body. My body's perfectly healthy right now from doing this. But I'm always reminded of her, and every single morning I wake up, it just feels like I'm honoring her as well, and just seeing this profound work that I'm able to create with y'all. So I thank you so much for letting me come on here and talk about this.
Absolutely.
This is really going to make a huge impact to,
I'm sure,
not just nurses themselves, but the world.
Thank you. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm extremely happy to hear how everything that you've been doing, the practice that you've devoted your life to, has not only helped you, but helped other people. Just with these last few seconds that we have here, I just want to express my appreciation again. And again, everyone, I'm going to post the links. Please check him out. Look at all of his platforms. Please look into his courses. I genuinely do believe that it'll benefit everyone. And thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that. As you can see, Aaron shared with us some really deep aspects of what it means to be enlightened, what it means to be connected with yourself, what it means to be in tune with yourself, what it means to be in tune with your emotions. We talked about we are what we eat, we are what we feel. And a lot of these topics, they can be a little overwhelming. So watch it again. Listen to what he's saying. Listen to the techniques. Listen to the questions that I'm asking. Write things down. I genuinely do believe that this can be beneficial to all healthcare professionals. Like I said, like I was saying in the interview, I don't think that this is an overnight thing. I think that we just have to have patience with ourselves and understand why we started this profession in the first place. But Thank you. Thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that you guys took a chunk of decent info from this. Stay tuned for the next episode. Check out my Patreon, my Instagram, my YouTube, my actual channel separate from the podcast. And check out my editor, Blake Quake Beats. Thanks, guys.